everybody. We're live. Hi, Allie. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. This is our Facebook Live episode here. We're talking about what you need to know if you're raising a female athlete. And I hope people are watching with us live. If not, of course, you can watch it later. If you are watching live, please, please, please send in any questions, any comments, any concerns. We'd love to hear them, and Allie will answer them all. So please send some stuff in if you're here watching. Otherwise, everyone, it's International Women's Day. So happy International Women's Day. It's part of the reason we're doing this today. We're talking about what you need to know if you're raising a female athlete. And Allie Smith is our guest. She's a trainer, a researcher, a teacher at South Carolina University. Allie specializes in the health of female athletes. And, you know, today we're celebrating you as well and all athletic trainers this entire month because March is National Athletic Training Month. And we've partnered with NATA, the National Athletic Training Association, and at yourownrisk.org all month long to talk about and educate parents about the important role that athletic trainers play in our athletes' everyday lives. So we're really celebrating two things today, and happy Athletic Training Month to you, Allie, as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And as I mentioned, it's International Women's Day, so we're shining our spotlight on the female athlete. People, if you're out there, please send in your questions. We're going to be talking about a lot of different areas that parents need to be aware of. If you have an athlete, if you have a female athlete, they're all really important to the health and safety and success of your daughters. So, Allie, first, let's get started. Tell us a little bit about you and your background.
Sure. So I am a third-year PhD candidate at the University of South Carolina in the Department of Exercise Science in the Arnold School of Public Health. I have an undergrad, a Bachelor of Arts from Otterbein University in Westerville, Ohio. And then I went on to get my master's in allied health from there as well. And then I was lucky enough to be hired on as an assistant athletic trainer. And I worked women's basketball and men's lacrosse for a year before I made my way down to South Carolina to start my PhD. And throughout all of my degrees, I've been fortunate enough to be given opportunities to teach athletic trainers in both programs that I've been a part of. Now at the University of South Carolina, I split my time as a student, but also as I teach lab courses within the athletic training department in both our professional athletic training program and our post-professional athletic training program. And then I also help do some research studies aside from my dissertation, which I'm getting ready to start in the next month or so. So I work under the direction of Dr. Tony Torres McGahey, who is a primary researcher in the female athlete triad in the country.
And that's really your area of specialization. And why don't we kick it off with that, the female athlete triad? I've posted a few articles on I Love to Watch You Play about that. Can you explain in like simple parent, like so that parents would understand what that means?
Yeah. So the triad is 3 components. So it starts off, and the catalyst is really this theory of low energy availability. So simply, if we're not fueling our body enough to do what we're asking it to do through exercise. And when we start to get that, our body starts to conserve energy. And by doing that, it's kind of stops certain processes, specifically to the menstrual cycle in the female athlete. And then that leads to other hormones being suppressed that help us with bone regrowth and regeneration. So we get this 3 components where we get low energy availability, which can happen with or without an eating disorder. We get menstrual dysfunction or amenorrhea, where these female athletes aren't having a menstrual cycle. And then we get really low bone mineral density, which leads them to be at risk for stress fractures or any kind of bone-related injury. And then when we get all 3 of those, that's kind of the bad end of the spectrum. And so we were having a lot of trouble, 10 or so years ago, where they weren't fully blown, all 3 components of the triad, so they weren't getting diagnosed and weren't getting the proper care and education that they needed. So with this new model of the female athlete triad, we're able to intervene a lot quicker and get these athletes the help that they need and the education that they need before we see all these long-term health effects. So that's the big scary thing about the triad is the low energy availability. It can happen within 5 days. So if you're young, if your young athlete isn't eating properly for the exercise that they're doing through sports or normal physical activity for a week, they can start to see some of these hormone changes that affect all of these other processes in the body. So we see that when they get to that low energy availability for more than a week and those hormone changes start to occur, they can have long-term health consequences, which the big scary ones are the infertility. Usually what we see in the adolescent population are the kids that are chronically sick, the kids that have strep throat all the time, or they have flus and they, runny nose, and they just aren't ever really healthy. The kids that are chronically injured, where they have bumps and bruises that seem to take a really long time to heal, more so than the average adolescent in their age group. And then the kids as well that just are always, something always is complaint. They always have a complaint of something hurts or I don't feel good. And those are the kids that we really want to look into these subclinical changes.
So when, as a parent, you're looking at, now obviously, infertility is something we might not know for a while, or it's harder to see at this age, but a lot of easily broken bones, easily sick, a lot of problems, a lot of concerns. And so a lot of times we need to look, like, if you have that, how do you separate the difference between it really being a problem, or like, how would a parent know the difference? And should they just always go see their athletic trainer, or always go see their doctor? And hold on, before you answer that, Allie, we do have some people watching. Cranky MJ has a puberty question, so we're going to jump to that really quick. Just, are girls who start puberty very early 10 more at risk for injury, especially ACL, MCL? Well, Cranky MJ, we are going to get deep into that, right? So let's finish our one that we're on right now, and then we'll get back to you. Kevin Gray, I'm watching with my 13-year-old daughter, Ella. She plays lacrosse, basketball, field hockey, 7th grader. Hello, Kevin, and hello, Ella. And definitely, Ella is a busy girl, right? So she would be someone, if she's not getting the proper fuel, like, what would you say, or what would your advice be to Kevin and Ella, because she's watching?
Yep. I would definitely stress the importance of some off time. So with those 3 sports, those kind of feed right into each other. So, a fall, a winter, and a spring sport. And I'm sure that they have an overlap at some point. So just making sure that she has, a 13-year-old, that's the prime age for all these to start happening, for our normal menstrual cycle and puberty to start happening, and just making sure that she has some time off to rest. Also really stressing that we're fueling properly in terms of, a well-balanced diet, but also some snacks before those practices, some good, quick, easy snacks. I always stress I work with cheerleaders right now that compete competitively all year round. So they're very similar. They don't really have an off season, but we stress small snacks like the grab and go kind of nutritional bars, or a protein bar, or I really like to tell them chips and guacamole from Chipotle. That's a quick, easy one that they don't feel like it's super heavy in their stomach, but they get the quick, easy, really quick burnable fats that they need to do a 2 or 3 hour practice. But really for that age group, I would be making sure that we're trying to get those bone building proteins. So a lot of milk consumption and things that have vitamin D along with the calcium, but then really stressing that time off that her body's able to kind of regenerate and start over and reset the processes.
Okay, hang on there. We also have, I hope, Kevin, that helped answer your question. If you have any more, put it back up there. And we had a request to see the new one. Sorry about that, guys. I had the old one up there. That is the new one. I'm pretty proud of myself because I am not techie, and I just got that one really cool. Sorry about that. All right, so that was for Nate. He wanted to see the new triangle. And you just gave a lot of good suggestions for snacks. Are there certain, you said you worked a lot with cheerleaders. Are there other sports, are there particular sports that should be more aware of this, that are burning more calories, or that seem to have a tendency, or what would it be they need to be a smaller frame for? Or
no, not so much the calories, I would say. The research is very prominent in what we term aesthetic athletes. So like you just mentioned, the sports that really stress a smaller frame with the thought process that that's an advantageous outcome in the sport. So like cheerleading, our gymnasts, our swim and divers, really anybody, our figure skaters are huge in that category as well, where a lean figure is going to help them, but then for them to be able to stay lean while also burning all of this energy through their training, that really is where we start to get this disconnect, and they're always working at this low energy availability. And like I said, after a week, we start to see these hormonal changes.
Are there some girls that are more prone to it?
I wouldn't say that. I would say really anybody that's working, if you think about just our normal youth, adolescent population, they're pretty active. And if we add sports on there that have practices 2 or 3 times a week, that's really putting them at a deficit. So just making sure that anybody that's involved in a sport is at least, this needs to be in the back of your mindset, that this age group of our adolescents where they're starting these hormonal changes to begin with just needs to be cognizant of it.
Okay. Everybody keep the questions coming. We love having the questions. Allie, this is great. It's a lot of really, really important information. As far as the female athlete triad, why is this something that we've only been hearing about? Is it just that they put a name to it? And maybe you did answer that earlier, but why is it something that seems like a new phenomenon?
I would say that for a really long time, so the triad has been researched heavily for about the last 30 years or so. Mm-hmm. I would kind of anecdotally in my own experiences would say that more athletes aside from those aesthetic sports, so typically it was our gymnasts and our figure skaters that really our research was heavy in. Uh-huh. Now that's really opening up to all female sports. So we've done research with basketball players, beach volleyball players, equestrian athletes. So all of these athletes and the level of sport across the country is increasing at such an early age that people want whatever they can do to be a little bit better than their opponent. And so the nutritional aspect is starting to gain some traction. And when they feel like they're fueling properly and they're still not getting the outcomes that they want athletically, this is something that comes up a little bit more frequently now.
Okay, so also with this new youth sports craze, everyone's doing it a lot more often, training harder. What about, I know I've read and heard a lot in certain sports like soccer, and this might be leading us into our puberty talk a little bit, but having a little extra weight on you actually causes concerns about the ACL tears, and it brings up this, so it's a real fine balance, isn't it, about the intake and how much is good and how much is bad.
So I tore my ACL when I was 12, so I can definitely relate to that. I had started puberty and had gained a little bit of weight, and just the overall body awareness. I think the big thing I want to stress though with the triad is this is a very much internal mechanism that's going on. And so when you couple this to where the body isn't functioning the way it's supposed to, where we're suppressing certain hormones and we're kind of cheating one system for another system to work the way it's supposed to, and then we add a change in body type or this a few extra pounds that you have to account for, that can really throw the whole body system out of whack. And so just having that young person be able to accommodate to all that is asking a lot, and something's going to break down in the process. And whether it be that they have low energy availability and they don't know it, that's the scary thing, is there's not an easy way to test for that. There's a lot of processes we have to go through to measure or estimate somebody's energy availability. Whereas we can tell if they don't have good quad to hamstring ratio by a few strength tests. And right. That seems a little bit easier for parents to grasp. But a lot of people, I don't have a good statistic to give you, but I would venture to guess a large proportion of young athletes that do have significant injuries of that nature are at a low energy availability, and their body's being cheated in one system. So they're kind of putting themselves at risk for those injuries.
And if parents don't spot it or the kids don't spot it, is that something an athletic trainer is trained to keep an eye out for? Are coaches being trained for this? How else? What are our other nets to catch this problem?
Definitely the athletic trainers. So it is now part of our curriculum and all athletic training programs. It's one of our competencies and educational standards to teach about eating disorders and the female athlete triad and nutritional concepts for the athlete. Definitely an athletic trainer should be a resource if you're concerned about this. Parents, the biggest thing that I would stress is just making sure that your athlete is getting a well-balanced diet. We see a lot of the picky eaters in the adolescent stage where they don't want a lot of certain vegetables, or they don't eat certain meats. They're sticking to the chicken diet or just hamburgers or something of that nature. Just making sure that if you do notice your child being a little bit more picky, that this phenomenon really needs to be in the back of your mind, because they're not getting the proper nutrients that they need, which already puts them at a risk for this low energy availability, which starts all of this process. We know that now the DSM-5, which is our manual for diagnosing mental health conditions, there's in the newest version, RFED, which is essentially our picky eating disorder. That's a really big one for our adolescent population, where they might not be a full-blown eating disorder diagnosably, but they're at least on the track of that puts them at this really low energy availability. So just making sure that we're getting good recommendations for our kids to eat a well-balanced diet.
And again, tell me how many kids will this affect, or like how prevalent is it?
The female athlete triad is more prevalent than you would expect. The full-blown triad, so all three components, is very rare. So less than 2% of our athletes are going to have all three components. The eating disorder, with or without, for the low energy availability, is the most prevalent. About anywhere, depending on the athletic population, is about 26 to 30%, depending, like I said, on the age and the athlete population. So about a third of our athletes are going to be diagnosed with at least the low energy availability part. What we're finding is that the amenorrhea, or the menstrual dysfunction component, we're not seeing as prevalent, because athletes don't think that it's happening to them. So if you think about our really lean athletes, they tend not to start their menstrual cycle until later, because
I was going to say that's kind of a common thing anyways, right?
Correct. And that's one of the big changes with this new model and this new graphic, is it's the menstrual dysfunction is now termed functional hypothalamic amenorrhea, which means simply that we're not having a menstrual cycle because we're lacking that hormone that creates the cycle. So we have two different types of amenorrhea. Primary is if they start before puberty and then stop, and then secondary amenorrhea is that they just never start until after they're 16. And so that's another really a sign that parents could be looking out for, is, in this age of adolescence, where typically girls start to go through that change and start to begin their menstrual cycle, if they're getting to 16, 17 and haven't started, that should be a red flag. And then a big scary red flag should be if they start and then stop for any reason.
Okay, that's good to know.
That's a little bit, we get worse, more complicated outcomes when we get the primary amenorrhea, so that they start at a normal age and then for some reason they stop.
But it is sometimes common, and not everyone who doesn't get a period early, even if their mothers did, I know a lot of times they say it follows their mom's pattern, doesn't mean that they have this problem either. It can just literally be they're just late in getting it, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be an issue.
Correct. Like I said, just needs to be in the back of their mind and cognizant that if they are on that track of a later start date, they should, at least ask their athletic trainer, ask a physician, their, primary care provider, is this normal?